2, 3, 4. Let me tell you, PuckPedia stats, contracts, and caps. It's all there for you. One-stop shop for your hockey information. It's a hockey sensation. So log on, log on, log on. If you give a puck, go to PuckPedia.com.
Welcome to Cap Central. It is January 29th. I'm your host, Keith Kavanaugh, and we unfortunately have Hart Levine back in the main chair instead of Steve, who did an admirable job last week. Hart, I'm just messing. How you doing?
Yeah, let's see who's in the host chair next week.
Oh, well, we got here. We're ready. Let us, we had a great episode this week on our PuckPedia Hockey Show with Eric Engels. If you haven't checked, go to the PuckPedia YouTube page or Instagram. So like, subscribe, comment. Let us just dive right in here, Hart. We had a good week of trades for the New York Islanders. Brian, if we could actually pull up the Palat trade first, I want to talk about that one. So this one, Ondrej Palat was acquired by the New York Islanders, along with a 2026 third round pick and then a 2027 sixth round pick in exchange for forward Maxim Tsyplakov. Somehow Don LaGreca nailed that name first off when he was talking about it the other night, which he's had trouble all years making names, but he got that one right somehow. So this is an interesting trade for a lot of reasons. I'm a Devils fan, so I'm super invested in this. This trade gives New Jersey $3.75 million in cap space. They had to obviously attach a third round pick and a sixth round pick as a type of sweetener for a quote unquote cap dump. Palat did have a 10-team trade list. I think he had to add the Islanders to that approved list. I'm not sure they were originally on it. Tsyplakov also has no trade protection for New Jersey, and you can bury an additional $1.15 million in the minors if that deal doesn't work out. Darsh adds Palat, who he knows well from Tampa, and he also gets those 2 draft picks for taking on that salary. Palat, ironically, had a good debut last night for the Islanders, a goal and an assist. Of
course.
He had 10 points in 51 games with the Devils this season, and he already got 2 points last night with the Islanders. He was gotten top 6, top 9 looks. Tsyplakov is basically a cheaper version of Palat, who had pretty good numbers last year, 35 points in 77 games, but only 2 points this year. What are your thoughts on this trade? New Jersey now has $6.88 million in cap space with LTIR, which will be approximately $3.84 million when Luke Hughes is activated.
I think it's a really good move for New Jersey. They clearly needed to clear out some cap space. They were fortunate a few weeks ago when it was a real cap crunch. They had a couple, I guess, fortunate, but there was a couple of guys injured. They went on LTIR, and that deferred the problem. But certainly, if they wanted to add or they wanted some flexibility, they needed to get off a contract, and Palat was kind of the big one. Frankly, I thought it would cost more to get off that contract. They gave up the third and the sixth. They took Tsyplakov back, which is pretty. Yes, he's got a decent cap hit at 2.25, but he doesn't have trade protection, or doesn't have a no move, so he could be waived and sent down. That would save 1.15 this year. Or next year, it would save 1.225 if he's still on the roster. So, potentially clearing another million, let's say, of that if they need. Could also be bought out. I think it's like $750 a year. So probably better to just bury him if you don't want him for next year, or try to move him. But basically cleared almost all of Palat's contract when you think of it like that, because Tsyplakov is either going to help you, or you're going to get the benefit from burying it or maybe buying it out. So so for the cost of a third and a sixth, I thought that was pretty good. I mean, obviously, every player, their value is in the eye of the beholder. The Islanders and Darsh see some value. They obviously know how to make him score. It already worked the first game. So let's see how he performs. And let's see also what happens in the season. He's also, his contract, after the season, it wouldn't be too hard to buy out as well. Or maybe there's some kind of a termination and signing somewhere cheaper. So this story is probably not completely written on what's going to happen with both teams involved in this. But I think, like I said, Devils got out of the contract kind of easier than I expected. And not to say that the Islanders then made a bad deal. I just think that maybe they could have extracted a little bit more. But having said that, they obviously see some value in the player, and they're not stuck with him. It's not necessarily a 2-year sentence.
Yeah, we don't know the market. Maybe there were other teams that were kind of bidding on his services. A 10-team trade list is limiting, but still a third of the league was able to acquire Palat without needing his approval. Tsyplakov also getting an opportunity tonight. He's projected to be on line 2 right now with Nico Hischier and Arseny Gritsuk. So we'll see how he performs. He was only getting about 9 minutes a night on the island, but he did have good numbers last year, and his underlying numbers this year are pretty strong. So we'll see how this plays out. But for Devils fans, I think they're happy that the Palat situation his cap hit, and I think a lot of that was the issue there. If he was making $2 million a year, I don't think the Devils fans would have as big of an issue with Palat, but unfortunately he's making 3 times that amount. The Islanders then made a second move. They actually made this move before the Palat trade, but it's only the 4th time in the franchise's history that the New York Islanders and New York Rangers have made a trade, and the New York Islanders acquired defenseman Carson Soucy from the Rangers for a 2026 third-round pick. It was the same price that the Rangers paid last season to acquire Soucy from Vancouver. This gives the Rangers $3.25 million in net cap space. He's a decent bottom pair defender. He has 8 points in 46 games this year with New York. He's not a point producer, but he's a guy who in sheltered minutes can win those minutes. I think he was had the highest plus minus on the Rangers this year. He was only one of 4 players to have a positive plus minus. I know plus minus is a much maligned stat, but still interesting to see that he was one of the 4. New York now has about $6 million in cap space with LTIR. They have a lot of guys on LTIR right now. Kyle Palmieri is probably out for the year, as is Pierre Engvall. Romanov might be able to come back in the playoffs. He's the heftiest of the bunch in terms of salary cap hit at $6.25 million. And then Varlamov's also on LTIR. So what do you think about the Islanders? Obviously, they're not going big game spending here, but they're adding around the margins, adding some veteran presence and some depth pieces here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is what's the story with their injuries. So if all those players are out at least through the regular season, or let's say all of them maybe, but Varlamov, even after all these deals, they have 6 million. Let's say they have to clear some space for Varlamov, easy for me to say. That would leave them, like about 4 million or so. That's plenty of space still, even after taking on Palat and taking on Soucy. So yeah, if you can't take the cap space home with you, so you might as well use it. So I think that makes a lot of sense for them to do something like this. Soucy, is he worth a third, or is he really worth a fifth? I mean, you can look at the pick value tables that we have on the site. There's not a huge difference in value. Obviously, you'd rather have a third than a fourth or a fifth, but if they like the guy and they had a need for him right now, and it's going to potentially add another win in the standings over the next few weeks, it's probably better to do it now than wait them out and try to do it for a fourth or fifth, like at the deadline. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the Islanders and for the Rangers. You get a 3rd round pick for the guy. I think that's a great move. You recoup what you paid. I don't think you were getting anything better. So if the offer comes in and it works, like, sell and move on to the next one to sell.
Yeah, good deal for the Rangers getting that draft pick back. And Soucy's a pending UFA at the end of the season, so he's a clear rental in this situation. The Islanders, I think Darsh made a message. He said, we're playing well. We're going to go for it a little bit. And I think that sometimes those moves, in addition to the hockey math and business behind it, it also just rejuvenates the group a little bit and gets them excited and gets them going. And so sometimes you can't put a value on that to make that move. And so we'll see how it plays out. And on the Ranger side of things, I know our pal Steve was mentioning, he's been saying about it last year, about this quick retool that the San Jose Sharks are possibly doing. And I know now Artemi Panarin is potentially rumored to be willing to sign an extension with San Jose. So we'll see how all that plays out for the Rangers. They have some big decisions to make, not just Artemi Panarin, but Vincent Trocheck, another guy who would have a lot of value at this time of year. And then maybe some guys like Alexis Lafreniere, that might be an easier move to make in the offseason. But the Rangers are really in an interesting spot right now post-letter.
Yeah, and I think similarly, like, they can go a few ways. They can sell some players. They also have now quite a bit of cap space to work with, especially with Adam Fox on LTIR. So they're a team that has deep pockets, so there's no reason for them to, like I say, take the cap space home with them at the end of the year. So I would think that they would and should be very active selling guys, and also trying to take on some bad contracts for assets, and just doing whatever they can here to maximize the return for a season where they're out of the playoffs. And I think there's an advantage for these teams that are like clearly out or like have decided they're out, because there's so many teams that are close to the playoffs. There's going to be a bunch of teams that have maybe convinced themselves they can make the playoffs, and they don't sell or they even buy, and then they don't make the playoffs, and that's kind of a big waste. So there's a little bit of benefit to having the clarity that you're not making the playoffs, so you might as well put your head into that.
Yeah, and the funny thing too is we mentioned this on the PuckPedia Hockey Show. Eric, a team in the offseason that was a quote unquote declared sellers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are basically, 7th or 8th in the NHL now, and clearly are not going to sell some of those guys like Raquel, Rust, Crosby was rumored at some point. So it's just interesting how that all plays out. The Buffalo Sabres, another team who are clearly not going to sell anymore. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Trade deadline's a couple weeks away. Let us go into a couple quick contract extensions that were just signed over the last few days. We got Sam Malinski from the Colorado Avalanche, 4 years, $19 million contract, $4.75 million AAV, 4.6% of the salary cap, takes him to UFA at age 31. Higher base in year 1, $1 million signing bonus in year 4, and then full base salary in years 2 and 3. Full no trade clauses first 2 years, and then a 10-teamer in year 3 and a 6-teamer in year 4. Really a breakout year for this guy, 24 points in 51 games. He's on the top pair right now with Makar, with Devontae's injured. Good underlying numbers, almost a 70% goals for share, which is pretty ridiculous. 59% expected goal share. He plays some penalty kill, doesn't really play power play. Colorado's got over $7 million projected cap space next year with 18 guys on the active roster. Just some smaller RFA, UFAs. No one really big time to sign. A guy like me that is interesting is, and I posted about this, is Sam Girard. Does he become extendable because of this deal? But all in all, I think it's a good deal for both sides here.
Yeah, definitely a late bloomer, right? Undrafted. Last year was his first full season in the NHL, and he's already 27 years old. So, it's the kind of thing where you're seeing some success this year. Even with the bump up recently, like he's still averaging just about 16 and a half minutes a game. So, that's your kind of number 4 to bottom pairing kind of defenseman. So let's see if those great advanced stats, continue if he gets more minutes and playing against tougher competition. But I think it's a pretty easy bet to make when you're only committing for 4 years, and that cap hit at 4.75. I mean, that's, if you look at where that fits on with teams, that's probably like a number 4 right now. And going forward, that's going to be like a number 5 for a lot of teams over the course of this contract. So you got to feel like he's at least that, and he's got some potential as a late bloomer to move higher up the depth chart.
Yeah, and UFA at 31, right? Like it's still in his prime years, so I think there's little downside risk to the Avalanche. They're a smart team; they make these shrewd deals. So, thumbs up for me on the Avs, and thumbs up for Malinski. Good for him to get that deal. The other extension, maybe not a thumbs up from me, is the Ben Chiarot deal with the Detroit Red Wings. He got a 3-year, $11.55 million contract, $3.85 million AAV, 3.7% of the cap, takes him to UFA at age 38. It was all base and no bonuses. Hart, we're going to talk in a second why this wasn't a 35-plus contract. So he has an interesting trade clauses here too. So full no trade clause in year 1, then a full no trade clause until 28 days before the trade deadline, and then a 10-team no trade clause in year 2, and then a 10-teamer in year 3. Not really the greatest underlying numbers this year. Basically, every player plays better without him on the ice than with him on the ice. He has 11 points in 54 games. So let's talk about this deal quick.
Yeah, I mean, I like the creativity on the trade clauses. Makes sense that, typically teams would switch the clause like on July 1st. Well, I think in this case, it was kind of a compromise that he doesn't want to get traded, in the off season after the first year. Doesn't want to even get traded, like a training camp or the start of the year. But the team wanted the flexibility. Hey, if it's not working, or maybe we're sellers or whatever, we want the flexibility at the deadline. So, he's guaranteed basically like at least a year and a half under this 3-year contract with Detroit, most likely. So that makes sense. I think the key for me is the 35 plus rule. So he turns 35 in May. So this contract could have been a 35 plus deal, which has some consequences. If a deal is considered a 35 plus deal, you basically get no benefit if you buy it out, and if you send it down to the minors, you only get $100,000 benefit. So this could have been a 35 plus, but the way that it's structured actually does not qualify as a 35 plus deal because it does not have signing bonuses after the first year, and it does not go down in compensation each year. It's just considered a regular contract. So all those rules that I just explained do not apply to this deal. So I think, again, if you're going to sign a guy that's 35 for multiple years, you don't want it to be considered a 35 plus deal. And I guess give the win to Detroit on that one.
Yeah, it looks like most of those 35 pluses are like typically 1 year deals, like a Jamie Benn, I think, or Patrick Kane might be on a 35 plus now, but like it seems like those are mostly just kind of 1 year deals. Let us keep moving here. We got the Olympic freeze coming up, and I think people know generally about the Olympic freeze, but Hart's going to break down the specifics about it. So from February 4th at 3 p.m. Eastern time to February 22nd at 11:59 Eastern time, there are no trades permitted during this time period during the Olympics. So players can be sent down if they're waiver exempt. There is some nuance to that Hart will explain. And then also players can be placed on waivers during the freeze. But again, there's a little nuance there. There is no restrictions on sending players down prior to the freeze. So why don't you talk us through this real quick?
Yeah, so it's not the same as the holiday freeze. The holiday freeze, basically you can't send guys down. There's a very small exception of guys you can send down during the holiday freeze, but basically you can't send players down during the holiday freeze. And there's no trades. But this one, I think, had been talked about as just a no trade, like a trade freeze, and it is definitely a trade freeze. But there's some other restrictions to it. So that's this. There was something that was circulated to teams recently that identified some of the rules. So yeah, there's no restrictions on what you can do up until the freeze, except for players that were on waivers. You can put players on waivers during the freeze, but if the player was waived after their final game before the freeze, they don't have to report until the 17th, which is that's when teams report back that are not playing the Olympics and they start to practice before the Olympic break is over. So that's one nuance. So you could see players on waivers basically. And the only thing is if they're either claimed or they're sent down, they still get the holiday time. They don't have to report until the 17th. The restriction on who can be sent down, if players do not need waivers, meaning their waivers exempt, they can be sent down except if they played in 16 of the team's 20 prior games, or they've been on the roster for 80 days through that point. So basically, if a player was like a recent call-up, he can be sent down if he doesn't need waivers. But if he's been in the roster for a long time and he's played in 16 of the last 20 games, so basically a regular, those are the kind of guys, even if they're exempt, they can't be sent down during the freeze. So this looks like a pretty reasonable setup that it's, the break is for NHL players. Teams can send a bunch of guys down before the break, which I think we'll see, so that they can both save cap space and get players some playing time. But they don't want to be interrupting, people's vacation plans that have kind of earned it as being regular NHL players.
Definitely. And our next episode next Thursday will be one day after the freeze goes into effect. So we'll be able to kind of recap what happened right before the freeze and if there were any kind of trades as a quote unquote pseudo mini trade deadline. We have one quick question here before we go into the newest site feature on PuckPedia.com. If you go to PuckPedia.com/coolbet, you can get in on the action today. Stay cool and bet responsibly. PuckPedia.com/coolbet. This question is coming up from JJ Oilers. He asks, do you feel as the salary cap keeps going up that cap hits might not be as emphasized in player salary is what teams will start focusing on? I have two quick thoughts here before I'll kick it over to Hart. My first thought is not every team's going to be a team that can spend up to the cap. So I think that definitely plays a factor. And two, just like I think how everyone sort of should look at the salary cap, it's not necessarily the number, but the percent of cap hit. So, a $95.5 million cap this year, $104 million cap next year. If it's 5% each season, I think that's what you have to look at as opposed to a $5 million or a $6 million raw value. So Hart, I'll kick it over to you quick here.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and it's similar to what we have now. It'll just be more accentuated as the cap goes up. Whereas, yeah, for most teams, they're spending to the cap, and so they only care about the cap dollars. They don't care about the salary. And I'd say like over the last 5 or 10 years, we've had like basically 29, 30 teams that care about the cap numbers because they're close to the cap or spending to the cap. And there's always been a couple real cost conscious teams like the Senators with the prior ownership. And we've seen some other Arizona in the prior ownership, right? Where it was really all about dollars, salary, and the cash expense and not the cap. I think as the cap increases, there'll be more teams that go into that bucket where they're not cap teams. And again, if you're not a cap team, then yes, I think you're worried more about the salary. So, where we maybe had 29, 30 out of 32 that really only cared about cap, I would say as we go up, maybe that gets to like 23, 25 that are more focused on the cap because they're going to be at the cap or very close to it. And then it's that other bucket that are going to be more conscious of how much does it cost, because they have their own internal budgets or cap. But it's a good question. I think it's a trend that we'll start to see the pendulum swing a little bit.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out as the salary cap skyrockets. Well, as we wrap up the episode here, Hart, Brian's going to share his screen, and we're going to talk cap slider. So essentially, if you go, just go to the front page here, Brian, and go to start from the beginning here. If we just go to the Buffalo Sabres, for an example, a team that, is a buying team probably at the trade deadline, a team that's not in LTIR. If you go to the cap projections tab, once you're in the team page, and if you scroll down here, there's a slider that basically tells you how much cap space the Buffalo Sabres currently have given their current roster construction. So assuming that they aren't making any moves from now until when you slide it forward, if you keep it scrolling here, each day they accrue cap space because they're not up against the cap and they're not in LTIR. So Hart, I'll let you add anything else. I know this is an exciting feature for you to have on the site now.
Yeah, so current cap space is the annual cap that a team can add at that point in time, or at a specific point in time. And you often hear that cap space accrues or builds up, and that's because of the way that the math works. That the less days remaining in the season, the more annual cap that a team can accommodate into their space. And so we built the slider just to show that and illustrate that as time goes on, a team can add more cap hits. So whereas, by the deadline that the Sabres, they can get up to $4.725 million they could add to it. If you go back a little bit there, Brian, yeah, that it's lower. So like what they can add today is a lot less. If they don't make any moves, that cap space can accommodate more annual cap hits. So I think it's interesting to see, like, maybe teams are really close to the cap and you want to see, could they actually make a trade today, or do they have to wait like right to the deadline? You could use it for that, or just to see, what your team might be able to do. And again, what needs to happen on the roster. And I think this is going to be really interesting over the Olympic break, which is why we'll see a lot of teams that are buyers are going to just wait through the Olympic break and kind of send some guys down potentially during the break, accrue a bunch more space. And then that current cap space number coming out of the break in a couple of days before the deadline will be a lot higher.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, yeah, no, I'm excited for that. Fans can have, it was nice to have the current cap space and the deadline cap space, but you didn't have that in between of understanding, at a certain date. And there's reasons why certain trades don't get executed until a certain date. And it's because those teams don't have the cap space needed to make those moves. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. You can go on PuckPedia's website and mess around with it to your favorite team page. Just go in the cap projections tab and it's right there for you. That is all the time we have today on PuckPedia Cap Central. We'll be here next Thursday, right after the Olympic freeze begins. So maybe we'll be recapping some fun trades that happened, or just talking about what teams' plans are going to be for the next month of the season. Hart, anything else before we wrap it up today?
Yeah, check it out. Actually, the inspiration was when the Rangers a few years ago, they had made a trade for Tarasenko, and then all of a sudden it looked like they were going to get Kane. And it really came down to like the day before the deadline where they had enough space to make it work. And I had kind of built something like that in Excel and was doing a screen share to show people. And I just thought, hey, we should have this on the site. It got a little buried on our priority list, but excited to now have that and let people see that. And maybe there will be a team that has to wait to a specific day to make a deal.
Yeah, you guys were really quick from when Patrick Kane got traded to the Rangers to getting this on the site. That didn't just happen, recently. But yeah, that's all the time we have for you. Thank you guys for tuning in. Remember to subscribe to PuckPedia's YouTube page, and you can find this show weekly live on X and YouTube. Also follow along on Instagram. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend.
Thanks.
PuckPedia.com